While my daughter was fighting for her life in the ICU, the family chat was silent. So silent that the only sound I could hear was the mechanical rhythm of the monitor beside her bed. Each beep a fragile promise she might stay. Then my phone lit up. My mother, "Your brother could really use $100K for his honeymoon. You're doing well, right?" I read it twice, thinking I'd misunderstood. Behind the glass, my daughter lay motionless, tubes threading into her small body, her skin pale under sterile light. A nurse adjusted a drip. Somewhere down the hall, a code alarm blared. And still, nothing from them about her. "No, how is she?" "No, we're here. Just money." I didn't reply. I muted the chat, then blocked her number with a steady hand. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt precise. The next day, my father called 9 times. On the 7th, I answered. And what I heard made everything quietly, permanently clear. I've always been the dependable one. The daughter who didn't argue. The sister who didn't ask. The person everyone quietly built their expectations on. My parents used to call it strength. What they meant was silence. My younger brother Samir was the opposite. Charming, careless, perpetually forgiven. When he failed a semester, it was pressure. When I graduated top of my class, it was expected. The scale was never broken. It was just never meant to balance. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions, and attention came with noise. So I became quiet, efficient, useful. I paid my own way through university, built a career without help, and eventually, a life that didn't need their approval, only their distance. Still, I stayed connected. Weekly calls, birthday gifts, obligatory visits where my successes were politely acknowledged, then redirected toward Samir's latest plans. When my daughter was born, I thought something might shift, that her presence would soften them, make things real, make me real. But even then, my mother's voice would linger on the phone just long enough to ask, "And Samir's doing okay, right?" I wasn't invisible. I was simply convenient. The calls didn't stop after that 7th one. They just changed tone. My father's voice, when I answered, carried a careful softness, like he was stepping around something inconvenient. "Your mother didn't mean it like that," he said. A pause. "You know how she worries about Samir." In the background, I could hear cutlery, low laughter, home, continuing as if nothing had fractured. I looked through the ICU glass. A nurse was adjusting my daughter's blanket with slow, practiced hands. No one in my family had asked what her name was. Later that evening, a message came from my aunt. "Beta, don't take things to heart. Your brother's wedding is a big moment." No mention of the hospital, no question marks, just a gentle correction, as if I'd misunderstood priorities. Even the silence had weight. Cousins who viewed my stories but never replied. A scene under the one update I sent. "She's still critical. Please pray." Followed by nothing. When my mother finally tried again from a different number, her voice was lighter than I expected. "You've always been practical," she said. "You understand timing. This is important for him." I watched my daughter's chest rise, then fall, uneven. And for the first time I realized they didn't think they were being cruel. Just reasonable. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled in quietly, like dust you only notice when the light hits it a certain way. It happened that night, when a doctor finally asked me to step into his office. He spoke carefully, measured words, softened edges, but the meaning landed clean. My daughter was stabilizing, but the next 48 hours would decide everything. "Be present," he said. "She needs you steady." Steady. I stepped back into the corridor, the fluorescent lights humming above me, and checked my phone out of habit. Another message had come in, this time from Samir himself. "Heard things are rough. Anyway, have you thought about what Mom said? It's kind of urgent." No greeting, no question, just timing. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked through the glass again. My daughter's fingers twitched faintly against the sheet, a small, stubborn movement. She was still here, still fighting, and suddenly everything aligned. All the years of being understanding, all the small allowances, the quiet sacrifices, the way I'd kept showing up even when they didn't. They hadn't misjudged me. They had counted on me. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not angrily, but with a kind of final clarity. I didn't need to confront them. I just needed to stop being available. I didn't make a scene. I made a plan, sitting in the dim ICU waiting area. I opened my laptop and began with the simplest truth. Everything they expected from me existed because I had allowed it to. Access, not obligation. By morning, I had requested a full review of every financial tie still linking me to my family. Years ago, I had co-signed a small business loan for Samir, something my father had framed as temporary support. It wasn't temporary. I contacted my bank and my lawyer, a colleague I trusted, and initiated the process to formally withdraw and restructure my liability. It wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Next, I updated my own accounts, beneficiaries, emergency contacts, authorizations. Every line that once defaulted to family was replaced. My daughter's name stood alone, clean and deliberate. I drafted a short, neutral email to my parents. No accusations, just facts. I would no longer be available for financial assistance, directly or indirectly. Future requests would go unanswered. Then I scheduled it to send later. Not out of hesitation, but because timing, I had learned, was everything. For now, my place was beside my daughter, where every decision actually mattered. And for the first time, my silence wasn't compliance. It was control. I didn't announce anything. I let it unfold. The email went out at 9:03 a.m. While I was sitting beside my daughter, counting the steady rhythm of her breathing instead of the seconds between calls. 10 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate. First my mother, then my father, then Samir. I didn't answer. By noon, the messages shifted in tone. Confusion softened into urgency. Urgency edged into irritation. My father's voice note came through tight and controlled. This isn't the time to make things complicated. I listened once, then archived it. An hour later, my lawyer forwarded confirmation the co-signed loan had been formally reassigned after I paid the remaining portion outright. Clean, final, Samir was now solely responsible for everything that followed. No warning, no discussion. Just reality delivered without noise. That evening, a single message came from him. You could have just said no. I looked at it for a long moment, then set my phone face down on the chair beside me. Through the glass, my daughter stirred, her fingers curling slightly as if reaching for something unseen. I stood, stepped into her room and took her hand. Outside, their world adjusted. Inside, mine already had. The reactions came in waves, each one softer than the last, as if distance itself was diluting their certainty. My mother's messages shifted first, shorter, uncertain, threaded with something unfamiliar. Not quite apology, not quite understanding. You've changed, she wrote once, as if it were an accusation. I didn't correct her. My father called less. When he did, his tone carried a careful restraint, like someone speaking across a line he couldn't quite see anymore. He never mentioned the loan directly, but I heard it in the pauses, in the way he chose his words. Samir tried once more, a single message. I didn't think you'd go this far. I didn't reply to that either. And then gradually, silence. But it was different this time. Not the hollow, dismissive silence from before. This one had weight, boundaries, consequence. A few relatives reached out, gently probing, trying to piece together the story from fragments. I gave them nothing beyond the truth. I was focusing on my daughter, because that's what this was really about. Not money, not revenge, value. For years, I had been measured by what I could give. Now, for the first time, I was defined by what I chose to protect. And that matters, because the moment you stop being useful, you finally find out who actually sees you. Recovery was slow, but it was real. Days turned into weeks, and the machines around my daughter grew quieter, one by one, until the room sounded less like survival and more like breathing. The first time she opened her eyes fully, really saw me. Something inside me settled into place I hadn't realized was still shifting. I stopped checking my phone as often, stopped expecting anything from numbers I had already let go. The silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like space. Clean, uninterrupted space where I could finally exist without being measured. I didn't rebuild those relationships. I didn't need to. What I built instead was smaller, steadier, a life where my daughter would never have to earn her place in someone's priorities, where love wasn't transactional and presence wasn't conditional. Work adjusted around us. I chose differently, projects, hours, people. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. I knew now what mattered when everything else fell away. Sometimes, I still think about that message. 100K for a honeymoon. Sent while my child fought to breathe. It doesn't hurt anymore. Because in the end, they didn't lose me in a moment of anger. They lost me in a moment of truth.